to the city. Got me. Hi.
Hello. We're just out here melting. I would say chilling, but we're melting. It's not so bad because we're on the east side and he's got the fan running.
Yeah.
Anyway, we had a suggestion that we talk about our careers. I guess you can call them careers. It's what we did.
Construction, bridge construction. That's my stepdad. And then when I was getting ready to get married, I started working at a month before I got married, I started working at a place in small town that made vice grips.
My fault. I didn't want him to be gone all week.
It was called Peterson Manufacturing, and they made these locking pliers. This is just one example of it. It's called a 10R.
Why don't you hold it closer so they can see? There it is.
It's got a straight jaw. I don't have a tapered jaw like a wire cutter with me right now, but this is also a needle nose, and it's got a bend to it so that if you get a special project you can use something with a bend in it. It helps out. They make C-clamps.
Did, yeah.
Yeah, they did. I have one that has a chain on it that you can wrap around. Say you want to wrap it around a tailpipe or something and clamp it, or around a pipe. And I have one that has flat bills on it for work with sheet metal. And they make some that have instead of jaws like this, it comes out kind of flat, and then it's like your two fingers clamped together, and it's for welding. They made all kinds of clamps. But I worked there 2 years. Then I went to a place called Storecraft, and they made store fixtures, retail store fixtures. Like if you go to a Target store, you might see a checkout counter or all the orange pedestals and things that the clothing's setting on and that kind of stuff. We did. There's a couple of places down south and out west, and I think maybe out east. But it's a store called Mervin's. They had it's a retail store. I mean, economy type, you know. And Victoria's Secret. We made stuff for all kinds of stores. Zales. We made stuff for Zales, jewelry store. But we dealt with glass, wood, metal, all that stuff. I worked there 20 years and 3 months.
He did get to drive up to the Mall of America.
Yeah, I did drive to Mall of America and dropped off some furniture there. I rode with another guy, went out to Salt Lake City, Utah. Eddie Bauer. We took an Eddie Bauer counter out there. Big, heavy devil. Long, heavy thing. Nothing to hold on to, but we finally got it unloaded with the help of the guys that work the store and stuff. But we got it unloaded and put up there. That thing weighed like 1,000 pounds. There was 5 of us trying to carry it. Just nothing, like I say, nothing to hang on to. Just a huge counter. You know, good looking counter, pretty counter, but just very heavy. We had a strike go on. It didn't turn out well, so I didn't go back. I had two older brothers that worked there also. Neither one of us went back. We found different jobs. I went to, during the strike, I was working at a factory. It's now Husqvarna, but at the time it was called Keys Manufacturing. They made lawnmowers. They made lawnmowers, zero type, push mowers. But they couldn't, they was messing around, they wouldn't let me get on the health insurance. I worked for 6 months, and then I went to a place called, I quit there because of insurance, or not being able to get it. Went to a place called Exmark, which they made lawnmowers too. I worked there 2.5 years. The first year I was on assembly on night shift, and then I transferred to a parts person. You go out and you look for parts to cover all the pieces that go on the line, assembly lines. worked there 2.5 years, and then I talked to a guy that I used to work with at Storecraft, and he said you should try working with the state. He's building a new penitentiary. So I worked there, went there and worked there for 19.5 years. The first 1.5 years I was an officer, and then I transferred out to the warehouse where it was more like a factory job to me. Making deliveries to the kitchen, canteen, on the yard, different various locations of the penitentiary. And that's where I retired from, December of 21. So it's going on almost 3 years now. It's hard to believe. That's pretty much what I did. Does that need a new battery?
Yes, it does. I had worked as a nurse's aide in the hospital in Kansas, just across the border, for a little while. Then, after the divorce, moved up here. I was just 19 at the time. But the only place where I could find, this was in the 70s, the only place I could find work where I could earn enough money to support myself and my daughter was Beatrice at the state facility for the developmentally. It was called the state home then. Now it is BSDC, Beatrice State Developmental Center. And I worked there, for quite a while. I met him, and I had our son in that period. But then I decided to go to nursing school. I was 25, I think, then, wasn't I?
Something like
Yeah, I went to nursing school, and poor Joe, he had to be probably both mom and dad most of that time. I was in the books. It was a 1-year practical nursing program. I had a small scholarship from a small hospital there in Beatrice. It was an older hospital, but it was a good one. And so I worked there. I owed them a year, I think. The regular patients. And I started not remembering certain things, like, well, I mean, I didn't do anything wrong, but people were complaining because I wouldn't remember a patient's name right away. Now they have you check their armband every time, but then I got a little upset about it. And so the charge nurse and I went down, did a test, found out I was pregnant. So I was having pregnancy brain at the time. But then later I went over and worked on the skilled unit, which there we took care of people who were elderly, people who were dying of cancer, terminal cancer, and just people who really needed that skilled care. And I found out that was my place. I had done a pediatrics rotation and stuff when I was in college. I could not handle that. My heart was just too soft for that. But end of life, I don't really have a problem with end of life. It's making people have their best last few years. And that to me was something I felt good doing. Giving them their best last few years. Or months, whichever it was. So then that hospital closed down. Ended up being mismanaged financially by administration, and so it ended up closing. And so I went and got a job at the BSDC again. But now I'm a nurse, so and I preferred working on the second shift. That would be from 3 in the afternoon to 11 at night. because there just wasn't all the people around, just, the hustle and bustle. And I really enjoyed that shift much better. And I did not mind working there. I really cared about our clients. But here again, you have administration and state. Oh, I'm not going to go into all that. But I worked in the hospital there and on taking care of the ones who had gastric tubes and tracheotomies, and because they needed really special care. But my daughter was getting into her upper years of high school, and I knew I was missing out on a lot. So I took a test and managed to land a position as what they call a psychological services assistant. No longer exists. That position no longer exists. And I worked that for quite a while. I was like, 10 in the morning to 6 at night, something like that. Everything you've learned is out the door and everything's gonna change. And it's like, no way. I'm not putting up with this. So then I left there and came down to the nursing home here. From there, I worked for a couple of years and I started having some problems. So I tried doing some home care and I was still having some problems. So I went to working as a transcriptionist. But things just weren't clearing up. And I'd been in a Christian singing group with 3 other people. Things just weren't clearing up in my head. They were just, everything was spinning. And I got really, really out of, I would drive somewhere and I would end up 20 miles from where I was supposed to go. It just, and finally I decided, okay, something is wrong here and it's gotta change. And other people were not, Joe was noticing it. I would just go blank. And they call that dissociation. Anyway, that's when we found out that I have bipolar disorder. It manifested when I was about 40 years old. I had never had any indication of it with my jobs or really at home before. But when that started, something triggered it. And then it really just started sending me on a tailspin. So I don't know if you know what it is, but it used to be called manic depressive. But your mood goes real high for a while and then it'll dip down to a low depression. My depressions lasted quite a while, and so did my eyes. Anyway, so that's pretty much my work history. I did get better and I did some volunteer work, but pretty much I went on disability because I couldn't work a job that would help Joe support the family. And so that, I'm not going to go into a big sad story about that. It's just that was what happened. And so now we're both retired.
Yep.
Both having a pretty darn good life. And I've been stable for quite a few years. I'm still taking medication, which helps me stay stable. But kind of makes me sleepy too a lot of the time. But I'm still a night person. Ever since I always wanted to work 3 to 11s or evenings, sometimes nights, and I'm still a night owl. They may never get that one out of me, I don't know. I don't want to get into any sad stuff because it's been pretty darn good. Other than those little bumps here and there that we all have in life. I mean, maybe it wasn't my bump, but we all have some kind of a bump in our lives, or 1 or 2, but getting through it. Getting through it and getting on to the next phase, that's important. You don't give up, you get on to the next phase.
Taking care of business and move it on.
That's right.
That's basically what you do.
Yep, well, that's what we did. We managed to get our 3 kids through school, and They're still around. They still love us somehow. And we still love them very much. And all of our 13 or 14 grandchildren and our 1 and soon to be 2 great-grandchildren. And then there'll be another 3rd great-grandchild
January.
in January. So our family is moving on.
Yeah.
And they're all working hard now and understanding more and more what we went through.
They're all growing up.
Yep. Anyway, we love all of you.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you so much. Next time we'll have a whole different subject.
Hopefully.
Well, yeah. God bless all of you. Good night. Smile and wave, there's yours. And we might just sit out here for a bit now that it's starting to cool down.
Our hearts beat to the city streets. We began to feel the fire. We rise like tall buildings as the